Yeah.
Okay, Commissioner Livingston, whenever you're ready.
Great, good morning. This is September 28th, 2017. It's 9:30 a.m. This is the regular meeting of the Washington State Public Disclosure Commission. I'm Commission Chair Ann Livingston. I'm joined today by Commissioner Acey and Commissioner Andrews. And I'll ask the staff of the president to introduce themselves.
Pedro LaValle, Executive Director.
Kim Bradford, Communications and Outreach.
And Chad Sanford, Assistant Attorney General for Board and Staff.
Barbara Sendall, Deputy Director.
Scott Douglas, Assistant Attorney General for the Commission.
Thank you. First, we have public comment. We have one individual signed up. Ms. Morgan, would you like to come and offer some comments?
Sure.
Well, once again, it's always an honor to be here in front of the Public Disclosure Commission. And for the record, my name is Glenn Morgan, and I live in South Thurston County. And I've been a frequently involved in the PDC here lately, so just become so interested in campaign finance laws. I do want to start out just saying that the more interaction that I've had with the staff at the PDC, the more respect I have for the job they're doing, and I realize that I'm probably a big portion of their job lately, but I think that they've done a really good job, keeping up with what is historically probably a fairly large volume of issues and research that they're having to deal with. And I just think that my interaction has, at least from my perspective, as a guy who oftentimes interacts with government agencies in a lot of them, I do have a lot of respect for the PDC, and that's improved over time. It's not always the case, but it is with the PDC, so I just wanted to say that first. Well, last time I came before the commission, I was talking about one of my objectives, and I think I've been as clear as it is possible to be clear on this, is to look at potential reforms of RCW 4217A. It's become more apparent to me that there is a need for some substantial reform. Now, my opinion when I first started on this a little less than a year ago has changed as to what those reforms might look like based on some of the data that I've collected and just experiences that I've had in talking to both people, treasurers and candidates and political groups from both sides of the political perspective here, or many sides. And I think one of the things that we have to look at, and the one part that does stand out to me, is that if everybody's violating the law, there is something wrong with the statute. It doesn't mean that everybody's a criminal, as much as people like to say that about politicians, and I refuse to believe that. But I do think that reform is also very difficult. Having worked sometimes for close to a decade of trying to do reforms in the state legislature that were common sense, that I had agreement from both parties on, and not still able to get it through, I know how difficult that can be. Whether people disagree with my tactics or not, that's perfectly appropriate. I understand. I just think that creating this incentive to look at this reform for the first time, it's unarguable that there's a need for reform. Nearly every legislator that goes into the session next year in Olympia will have demonstrable evidence that they have violated the statute, at least at the Kim Wyman standard established by the Attorney General's office, or more, or greater. And I cannot imagine any greater incentive than that to encourage them to potentially look at the reform. One reform that I do think is very evident in this process is that the citizen action notice process needs to be reformed. The threshold to justify and to trigger a citizen action complaint needs to be raised substantially. But in order to fulfill the goal as to why that was ever implemented in the statute in the first place, the Attorney General's office must raise their own threshold to match whatever that citizen action threshold is. So whatever we decide, some people have said it needs to be about $10,000. Some people have said it could be, maybe it needs to be triggered at $100,000. Whatever that level is, the Attorney General is going to have to recognize that they need to match their, whatever that threshold would be that would allow that trigger to occur. That has a direct impact on the Public Disclosure Commission. That really requires the Public Disclosure Commission then to step in and fill that void at the level that I think that the Commission was originally created to fill. And there's a lot of pressure, I think, on this Commission then to demonstrate the ability to fill that role, to deal with those lower level thresholds, which is really, I think, the intention of the Commission, to deal with lower level violations or technical violations. And I don't think that's as easy as people think it is. So, and I don't think that's as easy to, from a fiefdom argument standpoint. There's always bureaucratic threshold, and there's a bit of a tension between the Public Disclosure Commission and the Attorney General's office, and it's very obvious. And so there's going to have to be some give and take, and I would tend to err on the side of the Attorney General's office shifting more authority to the PC and allowing them to statutorily do that job and not step in cases where it probably doesn't merit the need to do so. Public campaign finance reform is not my first love when it comes to reforming statute. It's just I stumbled into this. So I'm really only planning to do this for about 4 years if I can't get reform. And I figured that if I can't, that's about as long as I can keep up this pace. So I figured that if I can't get reform by then the worst case scenario is there's just going to be a higher level of compliance across the board. I've seen it already. And so even if I just stumble through this process, at least it doesn't cost the taxpayers too much to just the T1 example, we've gone from 25% compliance now to actually probably fairly high level compliance on that. And a lot of other elements in the statute I think that have been just casually disregarded, probably more by accident rather than by willful maliciousness by a lot of campaigns and committees. I think that you're seeing evidence that there's a higher level of compliance. So worst case scenario, if my Don Quixote sort of crusade here is a failure, from a reform standpoint, at least there's going to be a higher compliance level. I am talking to a lot of legislators and as many people as are willing to talk to it, and I don't really care what political persuasion they might have. I might get plenty of arrows shot at me from both sides at this point in time. But I'm happy to talk to any of them about some of these ideas and hash it out, and I think that's something that's best done in the open and with as much transparency as possible those reforms can be. With that, I thank you for allowing me to
Mr. Morgan,
to speak.
just one question. Have
Sure.
you had a chance to reach out to Legal Women Voters, Municipal League, the folks who proposed the statewide initiative a couple of years ago?
I haven't had a chance to talk to them. I've talked to Washington Coalition for Open Government because I've had a lot of interaction with them in the past, and it's been less formal. It's been less formal on that side. The fear they have, and I share this fear, is, and this is the tension, is the transparency question, right, which we all want, and I really, everybody wants to know who's funding campaigns. That's like the universal, I think, accepted. No matter where you are, everybody wants to know that. The question just comes, how do you actually achieve that goal without building the bureaucratic sort of technical problems and incentive structure that actually drives people out of politics? My first experience with that, with dealing with some of the PDC problems in a way where I really started to think about this, was actually a group of Democrats here in Olympia. There's not very many Republicans, and I was helping them. They had set up a group to oppose a low-barrier homeless shelter, for example, and they thought they needed to set up a PAC to deal with this at the time. And in hindsight, they probably didn't because they weren't opposing an initiative or anything, but they didn't know any better, and this was their goal, and they set up a PAC, and they really were trying to do the right thing. It was a number of years ago now, 4 years ago, I think. And they really got run through the ringer, and they actually had complied pretty well, but they stirred up somebody locally that didn't like them. And I remember at the end of that process, several ladies that were involved in running it told me that they would never be involved in the political process again. That was the last time they would ever be involved. And I think that we need to change the law so that that's not the experience that people are having. And I'm sure that I'm creating that experience right now for some people, but it's got to be demonstrated. This was denied when I approached. I mentioned that at the time to a lot of people in office, and they said that's just a false feeling. But I think that you can't deny that anymore, and it just implies it needs to be changed, I think.
Appreciate that.
All right. Is that any other questions?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you know if there will be any interim hearings on that topic and/or an interest in doing it in January?
There's going to be hearings between now and January. I've been told there should be some in the next 2 months, probably work session style. The challenge is always, it's a divided government that we have in Olympia, basically. So the challenge is the reaching across the aisle and how much they can actually get together and make. I think they're having a little bit of a dispute as to how to set the boundaries on that, but that's what I've been told anyway.
And just to respond to that, that's one of the reasons I was just encouraging you to reach out to broaden the public involvement engagement in these so that it can be a valued, principled, not apolitical as one.
It must be bipartisan.
Right.
It must be. Otherwise, there's no reform.
My preference would be nonpartisan, actually.
Yeah.
It's attacked in a way of what's best for the public.
Did I say partisan? Oh, it should be nonpartisan. Yeah.
So anyway, just as you continue to work, if you can, if you have the opportunity to broaden those who are participating in the debate, that would be helpful. Thank you so much.
Commissioner Scott.
All right, next item on the agenda is approval of the meeting minutes from our August 24th meeting. Is there a motion?
I move we approve the minutes from the August 24th meeting as distributed.
Second. Been moved in second. Is there any additional discussion with the amendments? All right, been moved in second. All those in favor of approving the August 24th, 2017 meeting minutes, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Next, we have Ms. Hanson presenting a requested reporting modification.
Good morning. The modification today is a new request from a candidate for Linden School District 504. It's Christopher Constanti. One of the things I did want to mention before I begin with his request is Mr. Constanti utilized the electronic filing application to complete his F1, and he experienced one of the technical glitches that we've discussed that some of our filers experience. He completed the supplement page electronically, and it didn't end up getting submitted as part of his application. And so I asked him to provide some additional information, which the commission was provided that information through an email to answer some of the questions that I knew that the commission would need to have answered before considering his request. He is going to follow up with some additional, with an amendment with that information on the supplement page.
And Ms. Hanson, the IT issues have been shared with the IT team.
They are aware, yes, and staff has discussed it on several occasions as part of the process of when we get around to being able to work on the application again. It will be part of the list of things that can be discussed and hopefully corrected. So Mr. Costanti's request is for a modification to not disclose the business customers of his spouse's farm. She is a 33% owner. The rule allows an applicant to request a modification when they are not involved in the business itself. A spouse is the, or a dependent is the one that actually has the ownership or the business interest. The business is Kurt Mayberry Farm Incorporated. And his request is for the period of time previous to when he filed as a candidate, so June 2016 to June 2017. If he's elected to the position, he'll begin his term in January of 2018. He did answer the question as to whether or not there was any governmental customers. There are none. And then whether or not he has any customers that do business, whether the farm itself does business with the school district. He said there was no connection between the two. He also has indicated that he would recuse himself if any matter came before the school district when he's elected to that position. And he indicated that none of the customers are already publicly available. So his request is to not disclose these business customers that aren't publicly available because of the competitive disadvantage and then the confidentiality that has been agreed upon between the customers of the farm and the farm itself.
Other questions? Commissioner Hammond.
Jennifer, is the recusal language now part of that form? I was trying to find it that he filled out.
So
was it in the email?
That is correct. So the form itself that is on the PDC's website does include the recusal language. Some of our applicants this year have utilized an older form, whether they accessed it prior to when the recusal language was added or they received it some other way. So I'm hoping that next year we'll have the majority of our filers use the new form. It's difficult to, some of the applicants, this one of course is a new one, but some of the applicants that are requesting renewals will just continue to use the original form. I'm going to try to reach out to them and ask them to use the new form.
All right, is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I move that the commission grant the partial reporting modification as requested on the basis that literal application of the law would cause a manifestly unreasonable hardship on the applicant and that a limited modification would not frustrate the purposes of the act.
Is there a second? Second. Moved and seconded that reporting modification be granted. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Alright, that motion passes. And Ms. Hanson, you have an update on the matter that we heard previously.
That is correct. Last month, during its regular commission meeting, the commission considered a modification application by Amy Pavetta Hoffman. There was discussion during the meeting as to whether or not she was a very, as you remember, it was a very interesting situation, something that hadn't been brought before the commission or staff before. Ms. Pavetta Hoffman was asked by Commissioner Casey if she could go back and request to disclose the name of the one client that she had for 2016. And she was able to do that. And so she has followed up and has amended her F1 report to include the name of that one client. Just as a follow-up though, she is probably going to request this modification again next year. And staff is continuing to discuss the various components of the F1 itself as well as the modification process. I know the commission has discussed it on several occasions. Ms. Pavetta Hoffman is willing to participate in that conversation as well. So we're going to go ahead and try to capture some of that information from her. And so she doesn't need the modification, but she would be willing to participate in future, and she probably will ask again next year. I'm hoping that by the time she asks, that we'll have some additional resolution for her and for ourselves as well and for the public. So,
Anybody else want to add on
Are we continuing our conversation with the Bar Association on this subject? That they apparently said they didn't adopt the model language.
Right, as you saw it well, as you heard in the last meeting and saw in the minutes from that meeting, they seem pretty firmly of the belief that absent a court order, attorneys have this ethical obligation to their clients to keep billing information.
So that leads me to wonder if we should amend the WAC and make that clear that that's not an expectation, that we will comply with, that we can't trump with the
Well, it'll be in the commission's discretion, I suppose, whether in a particular instance they wanted to seek a court order to divulge that information if necessary. In this case, my understanding of the bar is that they would advise an attorney that need to divulge the information.
And we are, we do have the authority to grant exemptions. So should the fact pattern suggest
apparently this is the first time it was actually brought to our attention, right?
That's right, Jennifer, in your experience,
That's correct.
I wonder if it will develop into something where we don't want to just handle it with the exemption hearings all the time and make a decision on one side or the other, and then if we need legislation to carve out that.
I think that's a fair point. We're going to ask the bar to reconsider their ruling. Yeah, that's going to be a conflict.
So we'll continue to move forward, weigh options on that and discussion. Thank you. All right, we're now going to switch gears to brief enforcement proceedings on some matters that would normally come to a presiding officer, but because of prior violations need to come to a full commission. Mr. Young, are you presenting this, or please?
No, I'm not at the meeting.
That's true.
Yeah, you're first. What is it on that one?
Chair Levinson, Kurt has reminded me that we might want to wait until 10:05 just in case anyone decides at the last minute to call and then participate. In which case, we can go on to something next item on the agenda.
All right, fair enough. So what if Sandal is ready? Why don't we go ahead and do a rules update?
Sure, I just briefly want to let you know that our hearing for removing the filer forms out of rule is scheduled for 10/10, October 10th at 1 o'clock, and we have notified all the stakeholders. We've received one written comment, which we will read into the record at that time, and Mr. LaValle is going to conduct the hearing, and we will follow, the appropriate rules. We have filed the emergency rule for the public records request as far as the adoption of the fees that we can charge. The second part of that, which has to do more specifically with some language having to do with the commission, that's in process now. The expedited rulemaking is also in process for the fair campaign practices, and that's enough right now. That's what I have.
And then we have our ongoing list that has staff resources in capacity allow we'll move to the next batch.
Absolutely.
Are there other questions on the rulemaking? All right. Mr. Young, are you able to do the enforcement update, second complaint status?
Absolutely.
And Commissioner for the handout. It's what we started a few months ago. The staff did a great job with, which just summarizes status cases in a month between each meeting.
Exactly. Madam Chair, members of the Commission, this is the complaint status update from October 24th to September 27th. During that period, we received 5 new complaints. That included 42 that were citizen action complaints. We returned 5 complaints after the initial review. We sent 3 with complaint return letters with a reminder and 1 with a formal warning. Exploring the complaint publication process, so I found our footing on that. An issue yet, we're working on that.
Mr. Young, could I just for the public's understanding, can you explain what a complaint return letter is, why we would be doing that?
Absolutely. So the complaint comes in, we get the response, we do an evaluation of the merits, and we determine that there's no evidence of material violation or any minor violations or maybe unfounded allegations. And those complaint return letters would be sent out under the signature of the staff person that worked on the case and Peter's signature as well. And then we would post that letter on the website, notify both the respondent and the complainant, and then resolve that case ticket. And that's the complaint return after the initial review. And then we have a complaint return with a reminder where there's maybe some clarification on the reporting requirements, or just remind them of what their obligations are. And then we have the warning letter, which would be a more formalized letter of complaint return.
And generally, how quickly after a complaint comes in are we able to get back to folks as to whether it's there's no issue there, whether it's technical, or whether it's anything?
Well, that's what we're working at through our process to find a way to track that information, how long that takes, and which cases would be triaged for that. I don't know if Peter or PG want to jump in on that, or...
Sure, it's a matter of ongoing discussions in our process for that term with the enforcement team. I think anecdotally we can say some are quick. It's pretty obvious what the allegations are and what the facts are underlying that. Some can take substantially more time. Some appear to be pretty serious at first and do turn out to be employment return letters. Another thing we're beginning to explore is greater use, or I think the initial use of the complaint publication process for these type of matters. We just had a meeting this week looking at the requirements of that. move there. It's pretty technical as the timelines, pretty strict, I should say. As the timelines, we want to make sure we have that included in that. That's it gives the respondent a strict 5-day timeline to respond, after which we move that response. Giving us enough information, we can publish the complaint and the response and share that with the media and be done with it. So that's a fast process, but we need to make sure that we actually before we tie ourselves to this.
So in terms of the objective and the value of this, one of the reasons why we're trying to improve the quickness with which we can do that, resolve these, is so that folks can't game the system and file complaints and have it sort of hanging over someone's head for a long time if there's nothing to it, right? So the quicker we can resolve those when it's warranted, that's our objective.
Have staff's goal as well, so.
And the timeliness of the resolution is certainly something we'll get back to.
And an element of our strategic plan that we're working on as well, so. We didn't initiate any formal investigations at this point, or have any complaints that we were under formal investigation that we sought dismissal from the chair. We haven't conducted any deferred enforcement. That's another option, and that's in those alternative responses. But we haven't found a case that we feel could possibly fit those conditions. No statement of understandings were completed this period as well. We did conduct the mandatory filer enforcement hearings on August 23rd with Chair Levinson as the presiding officer. We had 48 hearings for the annual officials that failed to file the F1 reports. Those reports were due by April 17th, 2017. We also conducted candidate mandatory filer enforcement hearings for the C1 and F1 reports, in which we held 25 hearings for those respondents as well. For those respondents, 3 of the respondents were initially part of the August 23rd annual officials filer enforcement hearings. Mr. Swant shouldn't be in there. That's a complaint that generated his enforcement hearing. So Mr. Caton, St. John's, and Raleigh were pulled out of the brief enforcement hearings. The orders for those hearings were sent out on September 5th. Currently, we have 2 candidates that received an order that have requested a review or reconsideration, and we have 4 respondents from the annual filers enforcement that have requested a review or reconsideration. We'll bring those 6 cases to the commission next month as a reconsideration. And then we have 1 enforcement hearing scheduled at this time for October 26th, and that'll be the continuation of the Spokane for Honest Government case. And no reports to the commission. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
If I recall, there was a second case, the Spokane case, involving different respondents.
That's right, and obviously we circumspect what to speak to on that one, but I expect we will have a resolution or a presentation to the commission.
And do you all have your usual case status handout? That's okay, just at some point today to get that to us. Okay.
We definitely will.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Young? Thank you. All right. We have just a couple minutes before switching back, so let me ask Mr. Bowman, do you want to, or Mr. Young, do you have additional?
Nope.
And are you anticipating folks calling in for the brief enforcement proceedings?
No participants that we've been informed of.
Okay. So let's do either one of you. So whoever would
I'll be pretty brief, unless the commissioners have lots of questions. And so,
go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm James Gathon, the Chief Information Officer from the agency. And I don't really have anything to add to my written report this month, other than we are, and this is in the written report also, so we're now 4 weeks away from finishing the info search project, and we've had lots of great stuff going on as incremental releases, so I think everybody's excited and nervous about this last 4 weeks. Things are progressing well. Any questions?
I continue to be interested in some kind of public rollout of this that's in a little larger sense than has dribbled out so far. I know some are in the press corps are aware of it. I wonder if we could be sure and add that to the plans for some kind of event or show and tell, and bring the press corps down, and maybe others, editorial page people, maybe the chair could come down, Peter, myself. So I don't know the best timing, but I just want to make sure that's on your radar screen. Because I would be very unhappy if we just sort of let it happen and not. I mean, we need to brag on ourselves and the amazing products that have been developed.
We all agree. We were waiting till the whole functionality was there, and the search database function that we're getting ready to make public is really a key for the media, members of the media, as you know. That's really what they use, and so until it's all there, it's hard to.
So that's a month out.
Yes, that's correct.
And then at some point, so we're talking about maybe. Okay, so maybe something in November after the election.
I think that's right. We also have a presentation for the legislature as well.
Is that scheduled?
Not yet. I have spoken to Ledge staff about it, so we will get it scheduled for the first week in January.
Can we tell us some preview the Capitol Press Corps as well?
Yes, as I detailed in my staff report, we did bring some of them in, and they offered some suggestions. They have, we have then let them see the test site for search database, and they've offered some additional suggestions. So we are still working through that feedback.
So, Chair, is what's the level of understanding by the press corps of what's happening? Is happening? Do you think it's pretty well known, or just like selected you like us?
Well,
I know it's all in the team?
right. So we have been talking mostly in these sessions with the Capitol Press Corps,
right,
because they use it intensely. So there is a growing understanding of what the new features will do. Some concern about what is going away. We're working through some of those issues and trying to build in training sessions for open data to show them, as well as members of the public, what's possible on that, because that has a lot of functionality that we haven't had before. And once you learn to use it, there's a learning curve there, but once you learn to use it, there's a lot that can be done.
I think the commission should have a show and tell time too for this, because it is major step.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that up, and I totally agree. We're going to not do any more incremental releases, partly for that reason, because we want to have something which is this next major piece of functionality, which is kind of the intermediate. So I'm coming in to find out about my stuff, but I'm coming in to do some more advanced stuff. I'm not quite I want to do deep analysis, and it's that whole package of functionality. We want to do that as one big thing so that we can have a splash, and I agree. And even with the press corps that we've been working with so far, they're mostly focused on their own use of it versus that broader what is the impact for the public of now having an easy way for anybody to find out what's going on in the financing and the political process as it pertains to them. And so, yes, we definitely need to do some planning about how to do that, get it close enough to the release that it's still a splash, while not having it be on the day we turn it on. And we've all seen the fallout of people choosing to do that.
I have one more question. What is the status of, I understand there was a private nonprofit that was going to post all of the F1s electronically so people could go do that. We have not done that as a commission. But what is the status of that? Is it up and running now?
It is up and running. They had a.
What's the group called?
Well, the request came in to us as Politica Metrics. The website, and I'd have to look up that email that I sent out, but the website was, do you remember?
I don't remember, but I think they have Politica Metrics on the website.
Yeah,
as well.
they have a number of websites using public data and creating interfaces for people to search it, and the F1s are a piece of that.
And the last time I looked, the F1s weren't actually searchable. They were tweeting out individual links as they posted the F1s, and that was the only way to actually get to somebody's F1. That they hadn't done a catalog, although it's probably been maybe a month since the last time I looked at it. Have you seen anything more on it?
Yeah, and I'm not even sure that all the records are there yet. They may still be working. It looked like they were kind of batching them, getting them up online.
So if you wanted to see the F1s that say the candidates for Seattle mayor right now, we'd have to do a public records request of us to get them.
From us, unless they're available on the site. I haven't searched
You
specifically for
didn't
them.
know, you said you didn't think you could really go deep on, tell me all the Seattle mayor candidates.
Right, unless you were
Show me
following their
F1s.
tweets and they happened to tweet those out at that point in time. They hadn't had a searchable catalog. They do for some of the other stuff they're publishing, so that may be their ultimate intent. That may be there today. But I think you're correct that you'd have to come to us at this point to find a specific one that hadn't already been tweeted out.
Which I would have to return those requests quickly.
Switch gears just for a second and ask the management team if you could give us an update. We have a number of projects on the project scorecard where we continue to identify them as needs to be prioritized. And we're still working on the budget package. So do you have any updates on any of those, or where are you in your discussions of the prioritization and timing of those?
Sure, I can start, and then Peter can chime in as well. And so we went through and did curation of the backlog a few weeks ago. Maybe it's been a month now, and identified the two really key priorities that are big projects. As the commissioners might remember, we started off with kind of a bucket of various projects that were oriented around the F1, including looking at the form, getting some feedback on how the form works, potential modifications to the form. The process that leads up to someone being able to file an F1, and then ultimately electronically filing an F1. And after going through enough of that process to collect sort of what's going on with it, how would we like it to be better, needed to start moving on. Okay, well, what's the next project that's about changing the processing, how we lead up to an F1, and quickly realized that there's a whole lot of stuff going on that really we don't do in very optimal ways. And so, for example, how we ingest data about the number of registered voters in a jurisdiction, plus special caveats about jurisdictions that say, despite the fact that we don't have the registered voter count, we still want our officials to have X responsibility to file. Being able to pull all of those pieces of data together to answer concrete questions, because this is one of the biggest problems we have on the data side, on the information side of the agency, is you can go and you can look at the data and you can ask a question and try to determine, does Bob Smith owe an F1? Does Bob Smith owe a C1? Is Bob Smith filing the financial disclosure reports that he should be? Probably, sort of, maybe. is the answer that you get because of the data that we have and the way that we're organizing the data doesn't allow us to answer those kinds of concrete questions. So for a filer, when it comes down to saying, we're sending you a notice to say you want to owe an F1 because you held this office during this period, and your last F1 was here, which means you're in the new period and you owe an F1, please send us an F1, which will get a great response because we're saying, we know you need one, this is what we have on record. We can't do that. The same thing with an F1 that's owed at the end of a term. We actually don't have any information about when the term ends. So this next project that we're starting on is going to get us to the point of being able to do a great F1 application, but at the same time, it's going to make the annual officials process better, the registered voters process better, and the declaration process better. So we're going to have a charter, and I expect to have at least a draft with the charter for the commissioners by the next commission meeting. We're going to start on that in October, and as the commissioners know, we're doing budget. We're also doing IT certifications this time of year, so it's a little bit crazy. But we want to get that charter out and get the team together, and we know who's on the team already. So we're getting quickly ramping up to starting on that project.
Just want to add on this.
I would just add to that in particular that we know this is a pain point for a lot of our customers and users, and so it's a priority for us to make that process easier. And as you saw from Mr. Young's report, that we had over 100 hearings on these filings in particular. Yeah, I'm sure I remember that.
You'll never get back.
And that's not counting what probably literally hundreds of statements of understanding that resolve similar issues short of a hearing. So I know certainly the way I look at things is if we make it easier for people to comply, it's better for them, it's better for us. It's, we're not here to penalize people, we're here to help the public get that information. So I think going about it in this thoughtful way that James has described is really helpful.
Well, if you could, for the October meeting on the scorecard, since as you're working on the budget and timing of things, maybe a little more information to where we, instead of a status that needs to be prioritized, how we have prioritized and what the anticipated timing is we're thinking of now on these.
Yeah, no, I think
capacity
that's perfect timing as we wrap up the info search.
Okay, great, thank you. All right. Anything else on the IT front? Okay, then we're going to move to the enforcement matters. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll now move to the brief adjudicative proceedings. Let me just, for the record, remind folks, because it's a little bit of a different posture, that this is these hearings are being conducted under the authority of RCW 3405, which is the Administrative Procedure Act, and the relevant PDC statutes and rules, and we are videotaping these, holding them here at the Public Disclosure Commission office. It is still September 28, 2017, now 10:15 a.m. Commissioners and staff have introduced themselves, but now we have enforcement staff present. So I'll ask each of you to introduce yourself for the record, and then we'll swear you in.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Fox Blackhorn Delph. I'm a compliance coordinator here.
Kurt Young, compliance officer. Guy Riggins, compliance coordinator.
And, will anybody else be participating in this hearing for the staff? Okay, if not, I'll ask the three of you to raise your right hand. You solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you'll be providing this morning will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but. Thank you. All right, so let me ask Mr. Young if you would briefly state what F1 filing requirements are and why these are coming to the full commission as opposed to.
I just have a little summary that I was going to read into the record, so I appreciate that. So PDC staff, as I said earlier, conducted those mandatory filer brief enforcement hearings in August with Chair Levinson as the presiding officer. Those were for annual officials who were required to file the F1 report for calendar year 2016 by April 17, 2017. Those filers failed to do that. They got a warning letter in July and a hearing notice for the August 23rd hearing. Prior to that hearing, as I described earlier, staff determined that 3 of the respondents, Mr. Caton, Mr. St. John's and Mr. Walling were not eligible for the brief enforcement hearings in accordance with the provisions of WAC 390.37.143, the penalty schedule. Based on the number of prior violations found, their failure to file the missing report for the prior violation, or they have outstanding penalties. And any one of those three factors prevented us from taking them to a brief enforcement hearing, required them to go to a full hearing. The fourth respondent, Peter Swan, is scheduled today as a result of having 2 complaints filed against him. And based on the number of prior violations found against him, he was also not eligible for a brief enforcement hearing. Staff members Fox and Micaiah each presented those cases for the brief enforcement hearing. We thought this would be a good idea for them to get some experience before the commission in a full enforcement hearing. So each one will present 2 cases, and I'll be here to answer any questions or provide any additional information as necessary. Thank you.
And then, Mr. Young, just very quickly for the public, what is the F1 and what's the requirement for filing?
That's the personal financial affairs statement that's required to be filed annually by all officials by April 15th, with the exception of last year where that was a Saturday, so it falls on Monday. The filer discloses financial interests, including income, real estate holdings, assets and investments, any liabilities, and then if they have some participation in a board or some ownership interest in a company and they meet those requirements, they would be required to fill out what's called an F1 supplement as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so the first matter we have is PDC case 22224, and the respondent is Lloyd Caton. Who's presenting that?
I will be presenting this case.
Okay.
Oh, one last piece, if I could, I did provide you a spreadsheet of comparables, and I did present that, so if you have any questions when we get to that point, you better direct those to me, and I'd be happy to answer those. Thank you. Sorry,
Thank you. So as I said previously, my name is Fox Blackhorn, and case 2224 is about Lloyd Caton, who is an incumbent school director for the Tonasket School District 404, and staff is alleging that he violated RCW 4217A700 by failing to file a personal affairs statement for calendar year 2016, which was due no later than April 17, 2017. Mr. Caton has 3 prior violations. The first was in PDC case 13231, which he was found in violation of RCW 4217A700 by failing to file an F1 report as a candidate. Candidates are required to file this report within 2 weeks of declaring their candidacy. And in that year, he was found in violation and assessed a $100 penalty. The second violation was in PDC case 14-127. And in that case, this was any requirement for annual officials to file no later than April 15th. And he failed to file his F1 for calendar year 2013 in the year 2014. That year, he signed a statement of understanding acknowledging the violation and paying a $100 penalty for failing to timely file. The third violation was in PDC case 16-009, where he was again found in violation of RCW 4217A700 by failing to timely file the annual F1 report for calendar year, that would be calendar year 14 into calendar year 15. In that case, Mr. Caton was assessed a $500 penalty, with $100 of that penalty suspended upon condition that he filed the missing F1 report within 30 days of the order and paid the $400 non-suspended portion also within 30 days of that order. To comply with those conditions, Mr. Caton was required to pay that $400 non-suspended portion and file the missing report by September 1st of 2015. On October 21st of 2016, Mr. Caton filed the missing F1 report for calendar year 2014, and then 4 days later, on the 25th of 2016, Mr. Caton paid the $400 of the $500 penalty assessed against him. But since he failed to comply with the conditions of that order concerning the suspended portion, that $100 suspended penalty was reinstated already on September 12, 2015 without further commission action. Because it remained unpaid, the $100 outstanding penalty was reinstated and sent to Alliance One for collections on July 20th of 2017. So bringing us back to more closer to the present, in 2015, in 2016, Mr. Caton was required to file an annual F1 report for calendar year 2015, which was due no later than April 15th. While he did fail to timely file, that year he filed before we sent hearing notices out for a group enforcement process, and as such he was removed from that list and no enforcement action was taken for that failure, and he was not scheduled for a hearing. In 2017, as an incumbent school director, Mr. Caton was required to file an F1 report no later than April 17th for disclosing for calendar year 2016. On July 19th, 2017, Mr. Caton was sent a hearing notice for PDC case 22224. He failed to respond to the hearing notice, and at the August 23rd brief enforcement hearing, PDC staff informed the presiding officer that Mr. Caton was not eligible for a brief enforcement hearing, since this would be his fourth occasion in the last 5 years. And on September 15th of 2017, he was sent a second hearing notice for today's hearing. And as of today's date, Mr. Caton has not filed the F1 report for calendar year 2016. So PDC staff recommends that the commission find Lloyd Caton violated RCW 4217A 700 by failing to file an F1 report for calendar year 2016, and assess Mr. Caton a $1,000 civil penalty, which is payable within 30 days of the date of the order. Require Lloyd Caton to cease and desist from failing to file his PDC reports in accordance with RCW 4217A 755 sub 4, and fail to and file the missing F1 report for calendar year 2016 within 30 days of the order. We also recommend that we contact the legal counsel for Tonasket School District to remind Lloyd Caton and any other school directors about the F1 filing requirement.
Could you reiterate the outstanding, there's $100 is still outstanding with that line, with the lines?
It is still outstanding, yes.
Any other penalty that's been assessed that's still outstanding?
No, I checked this morning and all paid that on anything other than that one reinstated $100.
And you've not had any response by email, phone, or any other way
We
to
have
your
not.
services? And in terms of comparables?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So put the spreadsheet together. The three middle cases are really only dealing with just one report. Brendan Pierce, Michael Cusick, Nicholas Gray. Robert Jesse Hill, while he did get $1,500 penalty assessed, was $500 for an F1, and then he ran for 2 offices, so he owed 2 C1s, so he got $500 for each of the 3 reports. The last case at the bottom on St. John's will be up later this morning. He did get a $1,000 penalty assessed, but $500 was for the F1, $500 was for the C1 report. So the middle 3 cases, these were prior to the penalty schedule being updated as release cases on here. We had previously assessed a $750 penalty for a single report for these 3 filers and suspended 502 of the instances. So that's what we came up with, $1,000 for this penalty this time. It was fined $500 last time. Had it been under the current penalty schedule, we might recommend a higher penalty, but that's what we came up with, our $1,000 recommendation for this time.
On that point, it seems, I mean, this is totally off the grid in terms of the penalty, and the recommendations for this and the others seem to not go very much beyond simply continuing the same level in will, of penalty. And I know as compliance people, you think about, and we commissioners do too, about what gets the attention of office holders so that they comply. And the 4-time serial violators tells me they don't care very much about state law. And the oath of office includes that I will uphold the laws and Constitution of the state of Washington. So I don't know how you balance whether they're going to pay it and whether we'll get compliance versus getting their attention. I'm kind of a 2x4 in the head guy myself. So if you could sort of talk about how you set your proposals. I don't want to second guess your thinking process, but I certainly think they're pretty low.
Understood, that's fair. He has filed in the past and he's paid all of his penalties except that one suspended portion, so albeit late and not as timely as we would like. He's serving in a small jurisdiction. It's hard to get folks to serve. We think a $1,000 penalty would be correct in this instance. It's doubling the penalty from his last violation. $1,000 is not insignificant to a lot of us, so I don't know if Peter or BG have any additional thoughts on what we came up with. That was a rationale for these decisions on these 3 cases anyway. And we're recommending 1,000, and then we have 1,250 for one other matter.
Other questions?
Have you confirmed that he is still on the board?
I did reach out and confirm that he is still, there was a question about that in the previous year, but I reached out, he is still serving.
We had spoken, I think, last year about whether we could utilize legal counsel for these districts or some other way to communicate with the filers who were falling behind. When you reached out to confirm that he's still on the board, were you able to have any communication with somebody there at the district?
I just reached out to check that he was still a sitting member. I didn't inquire any further.
Just to clarify, as part of our F1 project that James was referring to earlier, we're exploring different ways to outreach with associations and other groups to reach out to filers, a more prompt notification process we discussed yesterday. So we have some ideas that we think would maybe help some of these folks get into compliance, not have these multiple occasions, but that is for a future staff.
Well, particularly the smaller jurisdictions, it would be helpful to have a point person, whether it's a court district or school district, who can be the fallback, as it were, to nudge people. Okay, so are there any further questions for staff? And we've had no communication from the respondent, so we have no ability to have any testimony from him this morning. And we have a recommendation from the staff report at this point. Are there motions?
I move that we approve the staff recommendation in the matter of Lloyd Kate.
Okay, is there a second? All right, so the motion on the floor in the matter of 22224 would be to assess a penalty in the amount of $1,000 payable within 30 days of the date of the order, and in accordance with 4217A 7554, require Mr. Caton to cease and desist from failing to file his required reports and file a missing F1 with also within 30 days, and for staff to contact the legal counsel of the task school district to remind them of the respondents' filing obligations. Been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Okay. So we will, having found a violation, assess that penalty, take the steps as outlined, and then memorialize that in an order within 10 business days.
And I would acknowledge Commissioner Hammond's concern. We're always trying to find that area. Are we being fair? Are we being equitable? And those are always good questions. So we're always searching for that.
All right, so that concludes the hearing for that first case. The next matter before us is PDC case 22183. Respondent in that matter is Monty St. John's. And do you anticipate Mr. St. John's participation in the hearing?
No, Madam Chair.
Would you go ahead and present?
My name is Micaiah Reagans. The next case is PDC case 22183 regarding Mr. Monty St. John's. Mr. St. John's is an incumbent school director for the Derringer School District 343 since being elected to that office in the 2013 general election. Staff is alleging that Mr. St. John's violated RCW 42.178.700 by failing to file the F1 personal financial affairs statement for calendar year 2016. As an incumbent elected official, Mr. St. John's was required to file the F1 report no later than April 17, 2017. Mr. St. John's has 3 prior violations. Mr. St. John's did not respond to the hearing notice or provide any information to PDC staff and failed to file the missing F1 report by today's hearing date. In the first violation, PDC case 13-231, a brief enforcement hearing was held on August 1, 2013, that found that Mr. St. John's violated RCW 42.178.205 for failing to file the C1 candidate registration form and violated RCW 42.178.700 for failing to file the F1 financial affairs statement, which were due within 2 weeks of declaring candidacy or no later than May 31st, 2013. During the first violation hearing, Mr. St. John's was assessed a $300 penalty, $150 for each of the missing reports. Since the fine remained unpaid, the $300 outstanding penalty was sent to Alliance One for collections in May of 2014, and PDC staff verified that the $300 penalty has been paid. In the second violation, PDC case 14-106, a brief enforcement hearing on June 10, 2014, found that Mr. St. John's violated RCW 42.178.700 for failing to timely file an annual F1 report as an elected school director for calendar year 2013, which was due no later than April 15, 2014. During the second violation hearing, Mr. St. John's was assessed a penalty of $300. Since the fine remained unpaid, the $300 penalty was sent to Alliance One for collections in June of 2015, and PDC staff has verified that the $300 penalty has been paid. In the third violation, PDC case 16-060 and case 16-156, a full commission hearing on October 22, 2015, found that Mr. St. John's violated RCW 42.178.700 for failing to file the annual F1 report as an elected school director for calendar year 2014, which was due no later than April 15, 2015, and violated RCW 42.178.205 for failing to file a C1 report within 2 weeks of declaring his candidacy. During the third violation hearing, Mr. St. John's was assessed a $1,000 penalty, which was $500 for each of the missing reports. Mr. St. John's paid $500 of the penalty on December 17, 2015, and the remaining $500 on January 15, 2016. As an incumbent school director, Mr. St. John's was required to file the F1 report no later than April 17, 2017, disclosing financial information for calendar year 2016. A brief enforcement hearing was held on August 23, 2017, in which PDC staff informed the presiding officer that Mr. St. John's was not eligible for brief enforcement because this is his 4th violation in the last 5 years. Mr. St. John's was sent a hearing notice on September 15, 2017 for an enforcement hearing before the full commission. As of today's hearing date, Mr. St. John's had not filed the F1 report for calendar year 2016. Staff recommends that the commission find the violation of RCW 42.178.700 regarding Mr. Monty St. John's for failing to file the F1 report for calendar year 2016 and assess a $1,000 civil penalty, which is payable within 30 days from the date of the order. In addition, staff recommends that the commission require Mr. Monty St. John's to cease and desist from failing to file the required PDC reports in accordance with RCW 42.178.755 and to file the missing F1 report for calendar year 2016 within 30 days of the date of the order, and to contact the legal counsel of the Derringer School District to remind Mr. Monty St. John's and other school directors about the F1 filing requirement.
Questions for staff? And again, you've had no communication response, email,
Communication.
and you verified that he's still on the
Yes.
Is there a motion? Commissioner Emmons?
In the matter of case 22183, I move that the commission approve the recommendations for Monty St. John's.
Is there a second? Been moved and seconded that in the matter of PDC case 22183, the commission find that the record does support a violation of 4217A700 for failing to timely file an F1 report for calendar year 2016, as we found in the prior matter, and impose the same $1,000 penalty payable within 30 days of issuance of the order, and require Mr. St. John's to file the missing F1 within 30 days of the order, and ask staff to contact the Derringer School District to remind the respondent and other school directors about their F1 filing requirements. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. That motion carries. A written order memorializing this order will be sent within 10 business days. Before we move to the next matter, let me just make a small, minor request of the staff. And when you send out these orders, if in your staff recommendation, point 2 on each of these, the reference to, it says, require the respondent to cease and desist from failing to file his required PDC reports in accordance with 4217A7554. Could be confusing to a respondent. It's we should flip that. It's in accordance with 7554. We are requiring him to cease and desist. It's not that he has to file his reports in accordance with that, because that's not the right section, right? So his obligation is in accordance with .700. Our authority to order him to cease and desist and file this from 755.
That's a good point.
We can just tweak that, and that'd be great. Okay, so let's move to the third matter, and that's two cases. PDC case 18104 and 23275, and the respondent is Peter Swant.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. So this case is a little bit different from the previous ones in that this case came to us in the form of two different complaints, which is why it has two case numbers. PDC staff is alleging that Peter Swant, an incumbent port commissioner for the Port of Walla Walla, violated RCW 4217A700 by failing to file a personal financial affairs statement F1 report for calendar year 2016 due no later than April 17, 2017, and that he violated RCW 4217A710-1G by failing to file an F1 supplement disclosing his officer's status as president of the Big Blue Boosters Club in 2016, which is a local nonprofit entity. So a little bit of background. Peter Swant was a first-time candidate for Port Commissioner for the Port of Walla Walla in 2013. And as a candidate, he was required to file both candidate registration C1 report and an F1 report within 2 weeks of declaring his candidacy or no later than May 31st, 2013. So the first violation that was found was in PDC case 13-150, where Mr. Swant was found in violation of RCW 4217A205 for failing to file that C1 report, and RCW 4217A700 for failing to file his candidate F1. Mr. Swant was assessed a $200 penalty in that case, $100 for each missing report, of which $200 was suspended upon the conditions that Mr. Swant file the missing C1 and F1 reports within 30 days of the order and commit no further violations of RCW 4217A within 2 years of the date of the order. Mr. Swant then filed the missing C1 report on September 3rd, 2013, and the missing F1 report on September 9th, 2013. The second violation was in PDC case 14-110, where Mr. Swant was found in violation of RCW 4217A700 for failing to file an F1 report for calendar year 2013 no later than April 15th, 2014. In this case, on July 11th, 2014, PDC staff received a signed statement of understanding from Mr. Swank acknowledging that violation for failure to timely file, along with the missing F1 report, which was electronically filed on July 7th, 2014, and a check paying $100 in a penalty to avoid a hearing. The third violation was in PDC case 16-064, where again, as an incumbent board commissioner, Mr. Swank was required to file that F1 report for calendar year 2014, no later than April 15th, 2015. And on August 5th of 2014, PDC staff received another signed statement of understanding from Mr. Swank acknowledging a violation of RCW 42-17A-700 for failure to timely file the F1 report, along with the missing F1 report, which was paper filed on August 5th, 2015, and a check paying a $100 penalty to avoid a hearing. Mr. Swank's fourth violation was in PDC case 10086, where Mr. Swank failed to file the annual F1 report in 2016 for calendar year 2015, required to be filed no later than April 15th of 2016. At a January 20th, 2017 brief enforcement hearing, Mr. Swank was found in violation of RCW 42-17A-700 for failing to file an annual F1 report for that says 14, but it should be for calendar year 2015. The presiding officer assessed Mr. Swank a $500 penalty for failing to file an annual F1 report in 2006, and that was in accordance with the penalty schedule in effect at that time. It was initially $1,000 and had to be backed up to $500. On February 14, 2017, Mr. Swank filed that missing F1 report for calendar year 2015, and on May 16, 2017, Mr. Swank paid that $500 penalty. So, as an incumbent port commissioner, Mr. Swank was required to file an F1 report no later than April 17, 2017, disclosing financial information for calendar year 2016. On May 9th of 2017, a complaint was filed with the PDC by Connor Edwards alleging that Peter Swank violated RCW 42-17A-700 for failure to timely file an F1 report for calendar year 2016. PDC staff assigned this complaint to case number 18104. On June 1st, 2017, Mr. Swank electronically filed the F1 report covering calendar year 2016. On August 2nd, 2017, a second complaint was filed with the PDC, but again by Mr. Connor Edwards, alleging that Mr. Swank violated RCW 42-17A-710-1G for failing to disclose his officer status as president of the Big Blue Boosters Club on an F1 supplement for calendar year 2016. On August 7th, 2017, PDC staff assigned a second complaint, case number 23275, and sent it to Mr. Swank, and no written response has been received for that complaint. Yesterday, on September 27th, 2017, Mr. Swank reached out to me by phone and indicated that he would file supplements for each applicable year, indicating his board membership. This morning, on September 28th, 2017, he did file electronic supplements for every report that he filed electronically, and I directed him to also file these supplements for the paper copies, but he has to file those in paper. So I now have a supplement disclosing his membership on the Big Blue Boosters Club for 2013, 2014, and 2016.
Not 2015.
Not 2015, because that was paper filed, so he actually has to fill it out in paper and send it in. So staff recommends that the commission find that Peter Swank violated RCW 42-17A-700 by failing to file an F1 report for calendar year 2016 and assess Mr. Swank a $1,250 civil penalty that is payable within 30 days of the date of the order. Oh, yes. I'm sorry, I missed the 710 allegation. So we're also recommending that the commission find that Mr. Swank violated RCW 42-17A-710-1G by failing to timely file the F1 supplement disclosing his officer status on the board of the Big Blue Boosters Club, and in accordance with those violations, assess the $1,250 civil penalty, which is payable within 30 days of the date of the order, in accordance with RCW 4217A7554, require Mr. Swan to cease and desist from failing to file his required PDC reports, and he has now filed the missing report for calendar year 2016. We also recommend that PDC staff contact the Port of Walla Walla Legal Counsel to remind Mr. Swan and other board commissioners about the F1 filing requirement.
A couple of procedural points before I ask for questions. Just in the staff in the written materials, the staff recommendation doesn't match the oral presentation. So I do want to make sure we're clear about what the staff recommendation is. So.
And that's on me, I drafted that, so I inadvertently put Derringer rather than the Port of Walla Walla, because I neglected to add 710, so I was going to add that on the record.
Okay. So the staff recommendation is that the commission find a violation both of 700 and 710.
That's correct.
And to contact the Port of Walla Walla School District, not the, Port of Walla Walla, not the Derringer School District.
That's correct.
So as commissioners are considering whether they want to accept the staff recommendation, it should be the verbal recommendation. Okay, are there questions or something?
A question on the 710(1)G on officer status. Could you remind me of that requirement for nonprofit work?
Absolutely. So on the F1 supplement, in accordance with 710(1)G, anyone who holds an officership, directorship, financial interest of over 10% ownership of any entity is required to disclose the membership on that entity on the F1 supplement. Officer status is defined in WAC to include presidents, vice presidents, treasurers, secretaries, named positions. Mr. Swan is the president of the Big Blue Boosters Club, and so he's required to disclose his membership for each year.
How does that affect his service on the Port of Walla Walla? What's the connection?
I don't believe it does. The Big Blue Booster Club is for the local high school,
right.
And so I don't believe there's a nexus between the school district and its port commission, but it is still a disclosable and required element of the F1 supplement.
Madam Chair, I move that we adopt as the commission the staff recommendation as presented orally in the case of Peter Swant, the two cases 18-104 and 23-275.
Moved and second. That the commission find in these cases that the record does support violation of RCW 4217A700 for failing to timely file an F1 report for calendar year 2016, and RCW 4217A7101G for failing to file an F1 supplement disclosing officer status as president of Big Boosters. Big Blue Boosters in 2016, a local nonprofit entity. The staff further recommending that the commission assess a $1,250 civil penalty payable within 30 days of the order, required filing, but he has late filed now both.
He has late filed. We are still asking him to file the supplement for 2015 as he was serving president of the board that year as well.
And then to contact the legal counsel for Walla Walla about those obligations. It's been moved and seconded. Just ask that, given the fact that he has now filed, does that change your recommendation? He's now filed most of them. Does that change? Do you have any different thoughts about the penalty?
No, Madam Chair, it's a violation, so filing it does not affect the recommendation.
Questions? All right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Find that violation and impose the penalty. Written order memorializing this oral rule will be sent in 10 business days.
The only requirement for a brief enforcement hearing order, so there's no 10-day requirement for a full commission action, I believe.
Nonetheless, the commission order.
Absolutely.
All right, and that will conclude that. Careful, or I'll say we that concludes the third matter. The fourth matter is PDC case 22190, and their respondent is Annie Wallen. And do we expect that respondent to participate?
No participation.
Let me go ahead and present the staff report.
The next case is PDC case 22190 regarding Mr. Danny Walling. Mr. Walling is an incumbent fire commissioner for the Clark County Fire Protection District 10 since being elected to that office in 2005. Mr. Walling timely filed everyone reports as an elected official for calendar year 2005 through 2009. Staff is alleging that Mr. Walling violated RCW 42.17A.700 by failing to file the F1 personal financial affairs statement for calendar year 2016. As an incumbent elected official, Mr. Walling was required to file the F1 report no later than April 17, 2017. Mr. Walling did not respond to hearing notice or provide any information to PDC staff and failed to file the missing F1 report by today's hearing date. In the first violation, PDC case 16-069, a brief enforcement hearing on July 30, 2015, found that Mr. Walling violated RCW 42.17A.700, failing to file the F1 personal financial affairs statement for calendar year 2014, which was due within 2 weeks of deciding declaring candidacy or no later than April 15, 2015. During the first violation hearing, Mr. Walling was assessed a $200 penalty for a filer with a prior violation of failing to file the F1 report for calendar year 2011. The 2011 violation is not included in the memorandum commission hearing materials, since the violation occurred beyond the 5-year statute of limitations. Since the fine remained unpaid, the $300 outstanding penalty was sent to Line 1 for collections on July 20th, 2016. To date, Mr. Walling has not filed a missing F1 report for calendar year 2014 and has not paid the $300 fine. In the second violation, PDC case 10089, a brief enforcement hearing on January 20, 2017 found that Mr. Walling violated RCW 42.17A.700 for failing to timely file an annual F1 report for calendar year 2015, which was due no later than April 15, 2016. During the second violation hearing, Mr. Walling was assessed a penalty of $500 in accordance with the penalty schedule effective at that time for a filer with 2 prior violations. PDC staff was recently notified that Mr. Walling has still failed to pay the $500 outstanding penalty, so that case was sent to Line 1 for collections. As an incumbent fire commissioner, Mr. Walling was required to file an F1 report no later than April 17, 2017, disclosing financial information for calendar year 2016. A brief enforcement hearing was held on August 23, 2017, in which PDC staff informed the presiding officer that Mr. Walling was not eligible for brief enforcement because he failed to file this F1 report for the violation found in PDC case 10089. As of today's hearing date, Mr. Walling has not filed the F1 report for calendar year 2016. Staff recommends the Commission find a violation of RCW 42.178.700 regarding Mr. Danny Walling for failing to file the F1 report for calendar year 2016 and assess a $1,000 civil penalty, which is payable within 30 days of the date of the order. In addition, staff recommends the Commission require Mr. Danny Walling to cease and desist from failing to file the required PDC reports, to file the missing F1 reports for calendar year 2016 within 30 days of the date of the order, and to contact the Clark County Fire Protection District 10 legal counsel to remind Mr. Danny Walling and other fire commissioners about the F1 filing requirement.
Just clarifying question, the $300 fine is still owed, and the status of the $500 fine?
He has not paid either one.
So he owes $800?
Yes.
He has outstanding fines paid?
Correct.
this causes me to realize that I think procedurally we need an additional finding. We had was it the first matter that there was also $100 outstanding?
Yes, Madam Chair.
I don't believe we made a finding that the respondent was in violation of that case, because now he has a new violation, and part of the obligation of the suspended fine was to not have any additional violations. So,
Yes, but that $100 of previously suspended penalty has already been reinstated into the collections.
right, but he's, this, what I'm hesitating about is I think our order should be inclusive of his obligation to pay that $100 that's outstanding. That's still pending. When we issue the order, his obligation is not only to file the any missing report, but to pay any outstanding penalty that was previously suspended. So this is just a procedural clarity I'm trying to get here. So in this matter, there's $800 still outstanding from those two cases. So any order that we issue should reiterate, in addition to any filing obligation, he still has the obligation to pay those outstanding fines as well as the new fine.
So will, if he were to pay $1,000, would it first be applied to the 800?
So that's the,
because that now belongs to the clients. It doesn't come to us. So how would that be?
whatever the commission orders.
Just to jump in, prior with, we've had an outstanding penalty, we would notify them in the cover letter that this penalty is being assessed, plus there's an additional penalty owed. It hadn't been part of the orders, but we could definitely include that into them as additional verification.
There should be a comprehensive record of what the outstanding obligations are.
Absolutely.
So let's start with the, whether there's a, well, do you have additional questions for staff? And if there are none, is there a motion by the commission?
I just want clarification. So this gentleman filed regularly without any issues until the last
Between 2005 and 2009.
and then after 9. They're missing.
And you verified that he's still on the market?
Yes, we contacted the protection district, fire protection district, and he hasn't been responding to phone calls.
Are there other questions? All right, so motion.
I would move that the commission adopt the staff recommendation in the matter of Danny Ballin. Case number is 22190.
It's been moved and seconded that in PDC case 22190 that the record, commission find that the record does support a violation of RCW 4217A700 for failing to timely file an F1 report for calendar year 2016. And that the commission, having found a violation, assess a penalty in the amount of $1,000 payable within 30 days of the order, and require the respondent to file the missing F1 report, and I'll add to that to find a violation of the prior cases for which the $300 and $500 fines are still outstanding. And again, reiterate that those obligations remain, and that staff contact legal counsel of the Clark County Fire Protection District to remind Mr. Walling and other school directors about their F1 filing requirements. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. That passes. Are there any other enforcement matters?
None at this time, Madam Chair.
Okay, then we will adjourn that part of the meeting and return to the regular commission business.
Madam Chair, could we take a vote for recess?
Certainly may.
Thank you for your work.
The commission will be in recess for 5 minutes, and I'll go ahead and just.
Never not chairs.
Yeah, I remember totally.
Commissioner Levinson, whenever you're ready.
All right, we're good. We'll be back on the record and back on our meeting agenda. And next up, we have our communications and outreach report.
Congratulations for communications and outreach. I did include some details in the staff report that was included in your packet. Those just to highlight, you do see that our help desk tickets have kind of leveled off. We continue to get requests for assistance that are more and more complex. I think partly that is as we get further into the campaign cycle, and part of that is also probably a reflection of the increase in compliance cases. That does have a ripple effect throughout the agency, and often when someone gets a complaint against them, they then need assistance in correcting or filing for the first time, sometimes years of reports, and that takes the expert guidance that Chip and Jennifer can provide. So often in compliance, you will see compliance handle the complaint, and then once the filer agrees to get right with their reports, that is handed off to Chip and Jennifer, and they can take the hours. And I noted in the report that the same process happens anytime we have mini defaults, which we just went through a round of those in August. We had dozens of those requests. Peter ended up signing off on 25 of them that we were able to get completed. But yes, those often are folks who have to rectify their books for months in order to transition to full reporting. And that ripple effect is something that we'll be making as we request additional staff across the agency. Because it's not, that dramatic increase in cases is not just felt in enforcement. I'll ask if you have any questions.
And what was the media particularly interested in?
It is definitely picked up in recent weeks. I'm getting a lot of calls about enforcement cases, and of course, what I can say is limited in those instances. Usually, I explain, what the law is, and then tell them a little bit about our process. There is a desire for a quick ruling on, well, does this look like it has any merit? And, of course, we have to stay away from that. But mostly it's, what's happening with this case? How do I find this information? And we've been getting contacts from across the state, from little media organizations and big. So it's been a very diverse group. I probably get at least 2 or 3 calls a day or contacts. So and I expect that to continue through the election.
And of course, in recent days, the Seattle Times has taken interest in the South Transit rebounder and TCC.
Transportation Crisis Coalition.
And so we've submitted that interest and dovetails with a lot of discussions we've been having annually internally with staff. I think one point that was raised in that series was how some of our forms apply to local lobbying, some referral to statewide lobbying, which is actually a statutory issue. There are issues where lobbying on a statewide ballot issue is reportable to the PDC, but it's a great example of rulemaking that you talked about earlier. One of those issues is to take our forms out of rules so that we can make updates to exact that sort of thing. The wording of the instructions for line 16 on the L2 probably could be worded a little more carefully to help clear up that kind of confusion. That's exactly the kind of thing that we should do. Oh, we just rework the sentence to make it clear that this part will apply to statement on the line.
Right, there is actually contributions to local ballot measures where the issue arises. Statewide lobbying is clearly planning the laws as the PC regulates.
Contributions to our grassroots lobbying.
Yes,
efforts.
yes,
Creating-
yes,
Right.
contributions to, yes, is where it comes in. And there is actually, there are some additional language changes we can make, and also there is perhaps a conflict in law on what's called out in the L2 and L3, and those follow the RCW, where one requires disclosure of contributions to local ballot measures, and one is only statewide ballot measures. So, whether you're a lobbyist or a lobbyist employer, you're disclosing either more or less.
Right. And we did talk about this on the potential legislation was if there's interest in aligning those legislators. Okay, anything else on communications outreach?
Has there been interest in the 45th district race?
Yes, we've been working, I get a lot of inside record.
Yeah. What's the answer to that?
Not yet, because as we have measured records in the past, it's spending. So with contributions, we might have at this point, but with spending, which is how we've reported it in the past, we have not. Now, we could have, we just haven't seen those reports yet because they're not due until October 10th. So once those reports hit, I expect that we probably will have set a record for a state senate race in spending, excluding independent senators, just spending by candidates. But we've been working to update that part of our website that has the records of costliness campaigns to try to answer some of those questions. And the state senate was one of the ones we did first because I knew those questions were coming.
Are the media recalling you using the new features on the website? Or, are you able to ascertain what you know about improving it?
So the calls that I get are in two camps. One are folks who already know what's out there and have been using it and see that there's a new feature and they're using that or switching back and forth between old features and new features. And the other camp would be the calls I get that they may have never been on our website and they just need help, someone to lead them through how to look up information or to look it up for them in some cases.
It's great though to have both of those when you're doing some more of the focus group work and beta testing, right?
Right.
For folks who haven't used it very much, to make sure they're comfortable. Thank you. Executive Director, Deputy Executive Director reports.
Sure, a few things I wanted to touch on, Chair. First, as you know, we'll be reporting back on our strategic plan next month. I think that process is going really well. What we've done is each member of the management team has taken responsibility for one of the main buckets, if you will, of what we presented to the commission last time. And then we created teams across the agency, so each team, so we have an IT member, a compliance member, a violations member, who will work with that management team member and we've been having leadership group meetings to go over the items on that list, come up with some really good ideas. I have stressed to the staff a number of times that new ideas are great, let's be realistic. We don't want to come, what we do keeps us more than busy. So a lot of what we do is a matter of defining how we do it, improving it when we can, keep track of it, doing it well. But it's also some ideas as well. And I think we've got some great ideas about that.
That's staff only. We don't need anything.
That's part of the reason, actually.
Yeah.
No, but on a serious note, I would add that I think the staff is really invested in this process, and ask you all to look at it that night when you see it, that you understand that obviously both input and feedback, and we obviously took that into account for the last session, but recognize that the staff have a lot of work into evaluating where the work is. Also wanted to report to you, we had I think a productive meeting with the Secretary of State's office recently. We wanted to talk to them in particular about this issue of what might be advertising on a ballot petition, or petition for ballot issues. Yes, exactly. And we want to make sure that we respected what are the goals and we're happy that they were very involved about that and understood that we had a role in the advertising piece. We recognize that and at the same time we recognize that petition for that jurisdiction. So that was helpful. I think they also, as part of that discussion, they recognized the pressures that our agency is under, and I think in a general sense we're supportive of this, seeking new avenues.
Did you have a chance to talk about the election day definition and statute?
We did touch on that, did we not, about the mailing versus time-wise, it's going to be
I know we certainly talked about it.
Right. Just next time, right, we do, because if somebody's going to change, they too have that reference to deal with, so it'd be nice if we're looking for a consistent way to.
For sure. We stopped using the term election day because it's an election period, right? And ballots go out 17 days in advance. It's definitions are sort of influenced.
Right.
Yeah, for military it's 45 days. Right?
Yeah, 30 or 45.
So as we're looking at, right, so we're looking at statutory cleanup, that's what we want to do collaboratively.
For sure, that's the
I understand you also talk with their data people.
Yeah.
I think Kim, did you?
Right.
Yeah.
James, Bruce, and I went over to their office, talked with their data folks about.
Sidward and Ferris.
And talked to them about what they're already, the information they're already collecting, and that was a little bit of what James told you about how the F1 project has morphed into maybe something a little bit bigger, or a lot bigger. The genesis of that was our discussion with the Secretary of State's office and just learning about the amount of information they already collect, and it is impressive and it is useful, and we are exploring ways that we can tap into it and hopefully to improve some of our processes and to cut down on the amount of data we have to collect independently. It has the potential to reform a lot of our internal processes and also make our public facing part of the website better.
On a similar note, we're continuing discussions with the Attorney General's office, particularly on the 45-day letter process and the federal complaint process, which is unusual to see that. I know compliance staff interacts frequently with their investigators. I speak with the attorneys and management over there regularly, and I have a meeting coming up next month with them, particularly to talk about billing, analysis internally about the billing that we're billed on 45-day letter work in different categories that might fall into. There are times when the Attorney General's office gets a 45-day letter and refers to us for investigation, which it seems to me would be to put it on a different footing as far as billing us than something where we get not referred to them. Try to look at what these different categories are and discuss that. And the last thing I wanted to touch on was our decision package process. We discussed in the last commission meeting. We're preparing decision packages for asking for, the way we ended up was to do 1 to 3 compliance officers, so propose 3, and And if we're budgeted for 1, 2, or 3 FTEs here, we're workload based on a pretty conservative estimate of our case volume based on the 9 months to date this calendar year, and then a conservative projection for the next 3 months. Those 3 FTEs would barely get us in an optimistic scenario of how much work each officer would get done. Would barely get us to our conservative estimate of case volume for the year.
How many cases do you project will have by the end
About
I think 795. We currently have, I think, 543 cases that have come in so far this year. And right now we have about 343 cases that still need to be worked on.
And we have 2 investigators and 2 compliance.
We have 2 investigators, 2 compliance officers. I have to give them quite an applause for all the work that the 4 of them have done. It's been very stressful to have that constantly hanging over your head, and certainly Fox and Micaiah have really stepped up to the plate, but we also see that we can't keep this up.
Right. Well, I'm just looking at the active open cases.
Right, 343 active and open. Thus far, I think we've already this year closed 310 cases. Right around there, we still have about 27 cases from 2016 we're working on. Right now, the focus has been on those cases having to do with the 2017 election. We don't see an end in sight to the cases that are, the complaints being filed. In fact, we're, continue to see an increase from January to September. We have had a 232% increase in cases that we've opened.
We heard Mr. Morgan say this morning he's got 4 years in mind, and now we've seen other.
Yeah.
So that's on the compliance officer front. With great help from all the staff.
And I remind you, this was an odd number here.
But I think we're doing a great job. In a tough, what we're told, a tough budget year. Not many health cases demands. Similarly, we have this pet decision package, posting assistant specialist, similar story to tell there. Again, as I referred to earlier, we help people get it right. It helps them, and it also increases that person caseload. So there's a compelling story to tell there as well. A lot of people get complaints against them, and of course they'll call and say, how do I get something compliance, what do I need to do? And so that makes us get there. We've got a good story to tell there. We've written one up for a general counsel position, and how we think, again, conservatively, that could at least partially pay for itself. That no offense to our AGs here in the room who provide excellent service, and I think at great value. If some of the 45-day work, or leave some work on that, and then finally, we're going to have 2 proposals for IT. One is specific projects such as moving our Creaky over servers to the Waltech data center, some other projects like that, and then the other is for 2 temporary positions, project positions, to help with things like updating the inflow application. A lot of applications, which are high. So I think
What would be the length of the contract? Is it 2 years?
2 years we're looking at for the
So the next fiscal year, and then the year after the first one.
That's right. We're trying to be realistic enough. Get sure we love those to be full-time positions, and is there plenty of work for those to be full-time positions? Absolutely. But we, so, reasonable request to take it from there. And as you said, working service is one business that's got a shelf life of some years to come, but as campaigns become increasingly electronic, having it work on one computer in the campaign is not ideal.
You put a dollar amount on that package?
On Orca itself?
No, on the request.
We did. Do you know offhand?
I don't remember offhand. There were 2 IT5 positions.
It's based on the fully covered
Yeah.
salary that is at that level.
Right.
So that means the total package request.
Oh, of all of that?
At the next meeting.
Yeah. We can bump
Yeah.
that before you put this together.
Yeah.
And as part of that process, we work closely with getting great support from the governor's office for all of that.
Well, and I think the media coverage of late on the transportation issues, again, just raises the point that there's additional work to be done there, so somebody can do it. Yes. Okay, thank you.
What's the deadline for submission of our request?
Well, we're under a little bit of an artificially accelerated deadline. We've decided to be proactive and give ourselves one because one of our key DES specialists will be out next week. So this week we made all our information next week before he's out.
I think it's October 9th, I believe, is
It is.
the OFM.
Yeah. So that will be before our next meeting.
That's right.
Yep.
Okay. Do you have anything else for that?
No, but I guess just as we go to the process improvement piece, I'm really excited that the team members here really embrace process improvement and those principles of lean. And it's pretty neat to see as we map a process and as we walk through it, the things that come to light and how we can continually improve all these processes that we have. That said, unfortunately, it's not enough. You know, we can't improve enough to get rid of all these cases, but I'm excited for Fox to tell you a little bit about our newest process improvement. Come on up.
All right, thank you.
This is our process improvement moment.
Yes, process improvement highlight. So as you may know, and as BG said earlier, compliance staff are dealing with a 232% increase in our incoming cases. This means that a task which the compliance coordinators, Makai and myself, could generally keep managed within 15 to 20 hours per month has been steadily climbing to 30 plus hours each month. Additionally, once we have opened a case, it takes about 10 to 15 hours of work just answering routine questions about when is my response due, how do I even start, what is this 45-day letter. And so as part of our broad process mapping of the life of a case, we were looking for an area where a quick fix would have a really big impact on our workflow and on our customers. And the first place that we identified was in our case opening process. So every single case that goes onto the public website is required to have a subject line with the name of the respondent and a really, really short description of what the allegations are. That's generally either a string citation of statutes and WACs or descriptive words like reports of contributions, expenditures, sponsor ID, etc. When Makai and I started here, we would just take that subject line and paste it into a separate box in the description box. So it was just an unnecessary duplicative step that created no value.
So to eliminate the waste in that action and fulfill the PBC's mission of providing meaningful access to information, we decided that we would take that description and make it have a better impact. And so for each incoming case, we now look through each complaint and we provide a bulleted list that takes the complaint allegation by allegation, tells people which statutory or rule provisions are alleged to be violated and why in sort of layman's terms, so that it's easier to understand what the concepts in a regulatory scheme are, as well as where people can go to look if they want to delve in more. That helps the compliance coordinators because we're required to know what's going on in all of these cases and identify trends so that we can alert other divisions, alert management staff, and try and get out in front of things. This helps the public because now when they're looking at these cases, they can quickly see what the case is about, and because the complaints can be a little dense. So it just kind of creates a little bit easier, more accessible way to understand. This also helps our respondents because they know without a shadow of a doubt, this is what we're looking at. This is what the youth has been alleged to be violated. If a complaint doesn't have citations, which is very frequent, we can input them. So somebody might know, somebody might know that you're supposed to put like the little paid for line, but not know that it's RCW 320, right? So we can input that in there. We can clarify when the complaints are a little confusing and help them understand this is the lens that the PBC is viewing it from. So respond to these allegations and correct if you think you need to make a correction. And we've started taking that bulleted list and inputting it into our case opening message so that when we send the complaint out, the respondent is notified. These are the different allegations. These are the different laws. These are the different concepts. Give us your response. So what was something duplicative and unnecessary has become sort of the cornerstone to ensure that everyone is on the same page for where the PBC is going with a complaint, and that we can have a standardized format to ensure that our voice is heard as we work through this very large volume of cases. All right, thank you.
Any other matters to come before us? No,
I just, real quickly, would like to thank Jana for her help in IT training that I needed to do that I couldn't find what I needed to find. Right there, gave it to me, so I appreciate it.
You're welcome. All right, then
And I don't ever have to do it again.
Rub it in, rub it in.
I'll tell you next appointment.
Let's get the statute changed so she has to keep filing.
Yeah.
Petition for lifetime obligation. All right, so the commission at this point will now go into executive session pursuant to RCW 423110 to discuss with legal counsel agency enforcement matters pending and potential litigation, and to review performance of public employees. The executive session will end at about 12:20 unless extended by a further announcement at that time. I don't anticipate any further action to be taken by the commission today, but I will come back and formally adjourn us at the conclusion of the executive session. So for those listening online, they need not hang on at this point, and we'll be in executive session now off the record.